You're living here.
Well, yeah, for now.
All right. The schedule just came out, so we should probably do the thing. Like now, or pack up your stuff now. I'll tell you the schedule.
All right, welcome back to the Views from the Gravel Lot podcast. This is episode number 9. I'm joined by a guest here. We'll get into that in a second. I got my co-host Trent and Mike on, and we're excited to do a Bills schedule breakdown, which is something that I'm very passionate about. A lot of us here love the schedule, like getting into it, talking about the matchups, talking about the records. We'll get into all of that. First, I want to start by introducing our guest, Peter DiBiasi. What's up, Peter? How you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. I'm doing good. I appreciate all three of you having me on. It's always fun to talk some Buffalo Bills. Yeah, and I love the schedule as well. It's obviously gives you something to talk about in May, and it's kind of fun to see, even though we're a couple months out from the season, kind of look forward to some of the matchups that the Bills would be facing this coming fall.
Yeah, of course. And I'm glad
That's what I
glad to have
love
you on.
about the NFL is that we've somehow managed to make a sport that their season starts in September and ends in February. It's just a year-round sport. I think June's
It
the
really is.
only month that nothing's happening. But yeah, one
No.
month. It's 11 months of
We do
Buffalo
got
Bills
OTAs
football.
though. We do got
Oh.
OTAs, so it might actually be 12 months.
Oh, it is 12
No,
months.
it's a year-round sport.
Yeah.
It doesn't end, and that's what I love about football
And that's
too.
okay.
So, yeah. All right, so we're gonna kind of get right into it. My first question we have is, which game are you guys most looking forward to? I briefly talked about this with Mike off the air, so I want to first ask Trent, and then we'll go over to Peter on what your guys' favorite game is. So, Trent, what game are you looking forward to the most on the schedule?
I feel like I have the easiest answer of everybody here. It's Bills Chiefs. I mean, I don't know if there's definitely more intriguing matchups that we haven't seen in a little while, but I mean, ultimately, like it's like when we were younger, it was the Manning versus Brady. Like you knew exactly what week of the year it was. You knew all the other games were cleared out, so that the only game that really mattered was Manning versus Brady. When Manning went to the Broncos, turned it into Broncos Patriots, and I think it's just the modern version of it with Bills Chiefs. I'm excited to see Mahomes back in Buffalo again. Because again, it's only been an Arrowhead. Like the scheduling's been kind of weird that it's just only an Arrowhead, and now it's going to be a run of only in Buffalo, hopefully. So, Bills Chiefs is probably number one on the list of games that I'm looking forward to.
All right, what do you think, Peter?
Yeah, obviously Bills Chiefs is obviously probably the top game the Bills have. Obviously the division games are always fun, playing Miami, all that kind of stuff. But the one when I saw the questions that you guys sent me, the first thing that popped in my mind was Week 4 at Baltimore. And obviously, look, Ravens, a team that went to the AFC Championship last year, one of the best teams in the AFC. It's a Sunday night game, so obviously that has a little bit of intrigue. But I think the Bills get a little bit slacked on from the national media for taking maybe a potential step back, even though I don't see that just based off their roster decisions this offseason. But I think the Ravens kind of did a very similar type of thing that isn't talked about enough, I think, throughout the national circles. And going to Baltimore on a Week 4 kind of matchup early in the year, I think it's a time. And look, obviously depends where the Bills are coming in at with their first 3 games, but they're coming at 2-1. They're coming in at 3-0, right? I think if you go into Baltimore Week 14, that you're kind of competing with potentially for a trip to the Super Bowl or a trip to the AFC Championship or whatever it is, right? Kind of make a statement, right? And I think not many people think the Bills are on the Ravens level, but if you go into Baltimore Week 4, end of September, right, and you beat, and you're 3-0 going into that game, and you beat Baltimore, I think the narrative that we have, that people, the national media has now on the Bills, would be completely flipped heading into October, and I think it's an early statement that the Bills could make.
Yeah, I agree
It's a
completely.
quality take.
Yeah, it is, and I agree. Just because you win that game, say you win the first 3, you're 4-0. You're sitting pretty after the first 4 weeks, and you got a lot of confidence now, and that can do a lot for your team's morale. And we've seen how this team rallies around certain things. they have been one of the best late teams in the NFL. Like I saw Saturday the other day, they're like 16-1 in the last 5 games of the season under McDermott. It's crazy. They rally around each other so well. Different groups of guys are going to be coming in. Obviously, it's going to be a different core of guys, but I'm excited to see how that works out. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike just because you said a team that I was interested by. And yeah, I want to hear your take on it and kind of give us what you think.
So my marquee matchup that I'm looking forward to is Week 6, Bills at Jets, Monday Night Football. I'm really eager to see, you know, how Aaron Rodgers will perform with that team and if he can really take them to the next step that they've been dying to get to for these last 2 years, and to see how the Bills truly respond to that. I mean, these last couple of years, the division really hasn't had, in my opinion, like an uber serious threat of someone who can like truly contend in the AFC. And if Aaron
They still
Rodgers can
don't.
be Aaron Rodgers, who knows?
Yeah.
Don't you mean Tyrod Taylor?
Oh
Isn't
boy,
he? Oh
we get him
boy.
rattled here. Okay.
Oh boy.
All right.
I mean,
Yeah. I'm just gonna step in right here and put a stop to that
He's got to
right
survive.
before he gets away. So yeah, I'm gonna just piggyback off Trent and say the Chiefs. I feel like that's the boring, easy answer. I mean, you can't really take for granted the kind of quarterback play that we see from Josh Allen, and when you see him go up against a guy like Patrick Mahomes, it's something it doesn't happen very often. And when these guys retire, which is, whether it's 10, 12 years from now, you're going to look back on these games and be like, wow, this was really a treat, because I think these two players are some of the most athletically gifted players to ever play quarterback in NFL history. I mean, you're just seeing unreal stuff play after play, and it's just fireworks. And so, yeah, that's my easy answer. And then another game I wanted to point out was the Dolphins in week 2. I think a lot of people talked about the weather being a factor early in the season against Miami, especially in the sun with the visiting team, baking in the sun,
oh yeah, it's a home
being
field
at a
advantage.
disadvantage. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. And obviously, they're going to be catching us not in the winter yet. It won't be that cold yet. So I mean, we won't be able to throw the weather excuses out for either side. So that's going to be fun. As far as fan bases go, I do think the Bills are still a better team, despite what the Dolphins did this offseason. And I think they lost a lot of players as well. So
I'll throw this
yeah,
out as a
go ahead.
consolation prize. Two other games that are intriguing. The Sunday night game against the Niners.
Oh yeah.
Sunday nights in the Ralph. I don't know how many more we'll ever have of that, so that'll be fun. And the Niners are good. And the Lions game, because the Lions are batshit crazy. I have Sunday ticket, and whenever I can, I try to watch Detroit Lions games, because Detroit Lions games are like doing crack, and I have to imagine that's why Aaron Rodgers does it so much.
And I
You
gotta
know,
say, go ahead.
I literally was looking at those two games and then I was just looking at the rest of the schedule and I was just thinking, there are so many quality games on this schedule. Like, there's really not that many like 1 o'clock, like, okay, Bills versus Patriots, where more likely than not that game's going to be a blowout. You know what I mean? Like, there's some really high tier matchups in this
Yeah,
schedule.
for sure. And we'll get into that more later on, like the toughest team we think we're gonna face, all that yada yada. And I want
I
to
think
go
the
back to what
Patriots will
Trent
fall on
said.
that.
Yeah, I want to go back to what Trent said about the Lions, because I don't think a lot of people remember because of how crazy the Bills have been, how many games they've won. The last time they faced the Lions were not quite at their peak yet, but it was Thanksgiving and it was quite a game. Josh Allen led a game-winning drive, or he threw an absolute hose to Stephon Diggs to set up a Tyler Bass game-winning field goal. And that game was awesome. I
It
like
was.
it wasn't fun as a fan to see my team put myself through that, but it was a fun game. So I guess I'll get right into the next one. And this is sort of a question that I've seen being talked about on Twitter, YouTube, all over the place. And it's down to personal preference. And I want to start with you, Peter, because a lot of people have different views on this. And what do you prefer? Are you a 1 p.m. guy? Do you like the primetime games? Because I know a lot of people during the drought were like, "Oh, I want primetime games." Now that we're kind of successful, it's like I'm kind of sick of the primetime games. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, so I have a couple different viewpoints. The first one, when I was in college, and I just recently graduated in December. So I interned at two different news stations as a sports media intern. And one of our jobs we're in the New England market, so we cover the Patriots, right? And obviously a Bills fan covering the Patriots. So I went to a lot of Patriots games, right? And for the last two falls, and going to a 1 p.m. game as a media member is a lot different than going to a Sunday night game or a Thursday night game or a Monday night game, right? And the Patriots haven't been that good the last 2 years. They haven't had a lot of primetime games, but I went to the Bills Patriots primetime game 2 years ago on Thursday Night Football, right? And it's a lot, right? You get there at 2 or 3, and you're not leaving there until about 12 or 1 as a media member. So if you look at it that viewpoint, the 1 p.m. games are better. And then I also pivot that to as a fan, right? When I was growing up, we weren't good. Wanted to always see us in prime time, and then we got good. We got a great quarterback, and now we're on prime time obviously 5, 6 times a year. This year 5, and you never know, it could be more depending on what they do down the stretch. They play at Detroit and they play at the Rams down the stretch. You never know, that could be flexed. Maybe Fox and CBS protects that game. Probably they do, but obviously you don't know until end of the season. I prefer the 1 p.m. games. I just think I just enjoy watching my team play at 1. There's just something about it, but I think I prefer 1, and especially I currently work in sports out of college right now, and I just prefer just the 1 o'clock games as a media member and as working, and as just watching the game on my couch.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I was at that Patriots game. Good atmosphere, good people up there in New England. So
Yeah.
just to give them a little shout out. But I want to go to Trent because, you enjoy sitting home watching games. You obviously
Oh
like going to
yeah.
games, tailgating. You like the whole 9 yards. So, where do you stand? I would assume you would lean 1 p.m. So, where do you stand?
Honestly, you'd be surprised. I'm all for primetime games. And that's mainly out of growing up, like we all did. I think I'm a little older than you, Ben and Mike. I don't know, Peter. I think we might be close to the same age. I remember growing up to blackout games.
Oh
Like
yeah.
straight
Oh
up
yeah.
people not eat, like Russell Salvatore had to buy the entire 300s so
Yeah.
that we could watch the game instead of listening to it on the radio while we're doing log work as the Bills get their cheeks kicked in by the Patriots again. But no, give me all the primetime games because primetime, it's to me, I've always viewed the primetime games, the Sunday night, especially Sunday night football, as this is the most important game of the week.
Oh yeah.
Like you are on the highest pedestal. Everyone's looking up at you because all the games are done. Nobody's playing at the same time. You are the most important game. Now, is it the most nerve-wracking games? Absolutely. But this is part of the ride. Like, there's going to come a day where the Bills don't have Josh Allen, or Josh Allen's near the end of his career and winding down his career, and then they get like one primetime game. It's a stupid Thursday night game against, I don't know, Tennessee or something, because they got to throw everyone on primetime. And we're going to be like, man, I wish we had primetime games. I'm going to be like, you should have enjoyed the fact that we get 5 of them a year and they're on every network. Like
Mhm.
everyone wants Josh Allen and everyone wants the Bills. And give me all the primetime games. Give me primetime and 425s because I watch enough 1 o'clock games.
Okay. What do you got for us, Mike?
So, Peter, I don't know if you're a hockey fan, but back in and I'm just throwing this as like a tie to my point.
Mm.
Back in like '05, '06, '06, '07, the Sabres peak, you know, um, prime on like versus playoff games, like marquee matchups, like just highly anticipated games.
Yeah.
And you look back on those times and they're nostalgic. They're like the good old days. And I feel like some Bills fans don't realize we're living in the good old days now. Like throughout the drought, throughout all of those years, there was years we didn't even get primetime games. Now getting 6, 5, so many, I feel like people take it for granted. And in case I made my point, I definitely prefer primetime games. I I just think the vibes are way better. I think the aura is way better, and I just think we need to appreciate the fact that we're living in the good old days in the modern day.
No, it's also like I prefer you kind of prefer both, right? You kind of prefer a combination, which we kind of get, and that's like the boring answer. No one listening to a podcast wants to hear. I like both, right? Like, because like obviously that's not a fun answer, but no, I get what you're saying, and I enjoy the prime time, 100%. Just sometimes when it's 11:30 at 12 and the game's ending, and you're just kind of like, oh, it's a little tired. I'm also a big thing of after the Bills win, right? The kind of your adrenaline and your energy's going. I can't sleep after for like
No.
2 hours.
No.
You're buzzing, you
That's what
know?
I'm saying. So if the game ends at
Mhm.
11:30, you're not going to sleep till 1:30. Games that ends at 4:30, you have like 8 hours to kind of
True.
relax. So
Relish.
there's good and there's bad for I think both kind of time slots.
Yeah, and I
So,
want to. Yeah, go ahead.
quick question. What is it like as a media member being at a game, like a primetime
Yeah.
game, and like as like a neutral person? Like, what does that feel like?
Yeah, so I was an intern at two different news stations, like I said, and I went to Providence College, so that's in the New England. It's in Rhode Island, but I was in the New England area. So I went, for example, I went to a Bills Patriots game, but I went to a Bears Patriots game Monday night 2 years ago, right? And it's cool. The vibe's kind of cool. It was Monday Night Countdown. I was like right behind the set with Schefter and all that kind of stuff going around Monday Night Countdown. There's a lot more media people there because it's not your typical 1 o'clock game, but it's a long day, right? Like you're there at 2, 3 o'clock because you're doing news shots from at 4. You're doing a news shot at 5. You're doing a news shot at 6, maybe 6:30, right? And then the game starts at 8, ends at 11:30, and then you're doing recording stuff for the next day, right? So it's a long day. It's exciting. It's kind of cool. Being in a stadium at night is kind of cool. It's a fun. It's a long day, and eventually kind of catches up to you. But it's cool with kind of the excitement around there. You have a lot more news crews. You have a lot more kind of national people there outside of like whoever's broadcasting the game, if it's CBS or it's Fox.
The local media?
Yeah, you have a little bit more of the ESPN crew kind of down there. Or when I went to the Bills game, it was the Thursday Night Football on Prime, right? So I walked by Fitzy and all that kind of stuff. I think Richard Sherman was on it as well. And it's just kind of cool, and it's a little bit more of a vibe, but it's a long day. So there's good and there's kind of bad with it as well.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
and yeah, I get it. I mean, I spoke to Matt Perino about it, and he talked about the life as a as a journalist being on the
Yeah.
road. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot that goes into it,
Mhm.
and I respect you guys a ton. It's obviously something I want to do with my career, and that's something I'm pursuing. And that's kind of what we're all here. We're all here to talk about football. It's something we're passionate about. And as far as what I think about the prime time or the 1 p.m. games, I like this. I like what your answer was, a little bit of both. And I as a fan, though, I prefer the 1 p.m. games just because I don't know about you guys. I get super stressed during Bills games. I'm pacing
Yeah.
around the room. I'm stress eating. Like I'm a wreck, and I'm not like
Stress
that with.
eating.
I'm, dude. I'm
I
not
think
like that
that's
with
just
anything
that's it.
else.
I think it's just
It's not
enjoying the
healthy.
game.
No, it's not healthy. But here's the thing.
You
Like
telling
I
me
like the 1 p.m.
that
games.
people watch Bills games and they don't devour a whole bowl of chips just out of just doing it? Like,
Yeah, yeah. No,
I feel like that's just what you do.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying is like, I'd rather have the whole day to kind of digest everything that happened because it's a lot that happens in, a 60-minute football game that you have to process, especially as us passionate fans. Like you really get into it and you get, you want to be able to process it all. And I think, when you got those nighttime games, you can't really celebrate it as much because, especially when it's a Sunday night game, oh, you got to work tomorrow, oh, you got school tomorrow. Like, you can't really, live the high a little bit. So, yeah, I prefer the 1 p.m. games. That's just kind of my spin on it. And that will kind of just take us into our next thing. It's just kind of talking about some of the opening matchup here. And Peter, I know you predicted that the Patriots would be the first game of the season, and that was one
Yeah.
of the finalists. But they ended up getting the Cardinals. In week one, I think a lot of people kind of forget how wonky it is. There's a lot of, fog of war. There's a lot of unknown. And, you got a young, hungry team like the Cardinals. I don't think it's as easy as some people are making it out to be. So I want to go around and ask everybody, what do you think of this matchup? Would you have preferred somebody a little bit more difficult out of the gates, or do you like a kind of a younger team that coming in on the road against this Marvin Harrison debut? I'm gonna start with Mike. What do you think of this matchup?
I, of course, would have loved, to have that bigger game in that slot, like something like Bills Kansas City or Bills Lions, even like something like that. But I can appreciate this game in the facet of getting to see what Marvin Harrison's really going to be all about in the NFL, getting to see what this Bills defense is going to look like against one of the more dynamic dual threats in this game in Kyler Murray. And I feel like it's going to be a really good game for this team to get their feet wet to see where they kind of settle in on both sides of the ball this season and what team they can be.
Yeah. What about Peter?
Yeah, like you said, I predicted the Patriots. That was more of just a guess, and obviously I was wrong. A couple people on Twitter decided to let me know that I was wrong for I don't know, for some reason just picking.
People gonna let you know you're wrong about the fucking schedule?
Yeah, people are
That's crazy.
and I get a
What
good
are we
amount.
doing here?
Yeah, not obviously to toot my own horn. I have a good amount of followers on Twitter, so I get a
Next
good
time
amount.
somebody wants to tell you you're wrong about the schedule, send them a picture of the sun so they can find it.
Yeah, so yeah, no, it's always something. It's always something new on I guess it's X, but always something new
It's
on Twitter. I know, but yeah, look, to answer your question, the Arizona game, I think one, I get it, like you want to have that kind of cool game, like Michael, like we were just kind of alluded to, right? You want to have Detroit, right? Even the Rams or even San Fran could have been a game. Could have even done Miami, right? You could have done
For sure.
some even like there's a handful. The Bills have a ton of really good matchups, like we alluded to before. You could have done on week one, but I don't know if it's a bad thing, right? I think if the as long as the Bills don't come out flat, and like we said earlier, Ben, you said that, right? Like teams in week one are kind of weird, right? You see
Right.
when we look back at the end of the year, like, okay, how the heck did this team lose to this team, right? How is that even possible? This team finished with 5 wins and this team finished with 13. It's week one, right? Stuff happens in the National Football League, but I think the Cardinals are gonna be better than people think. I just think you are getting them at a good time because this is a young team. They don't have Hollywood Brown anymore, right? Kind of developing weapons with Marvin Harrison Jr. Kyler Murray still, I don't fully buy Kyler Murray, but he's still kind of coming back from the ACL. This is a big year for what Kyler Murray has to do. Their defense isn't great. I think this is a time where it's a good time to get them because I do think the Cardinals are going to be better than people think. I think it might take a little while. And I think coming into Buffalo at 1 o'clock, as long as the Bills kind of just do their thing, and just they don't have to play a perfect game, but just kind of do their thing. I think that this is a good week one matchup, and it's always nice to start. And it always annoys me, but when you lose week one, like you've seen that 0-1, drives me for some reason absolutely bonkers. And obviously the Jets game drove me absolutely bonkers for probably 70,000 different reasons.
Oh,
Drove me nuts too.
you're not the only one.
Yeah, then just
Yeah.
starting 0-1. But I think if you start 1-0, I think it's a winnable game. I think like they're 6, 7 point favorites, and I think you're getting Arizona at a pretty good time, which is I think good for the Bills.
All right. Now I'm going to turn this over to Trent. Trent, do you like the matchup of week one against Arizona?
Honestly, I was gonna say this was going to be my trap game if it ended up in like the slog of like week 8 or 9, just
Yeah.
middle of the season. In the past the Bills used to be good for like one game. You look at it, you're like, did they practice this week? Did everyone take a vacation? Well, what the hell happened? Since it's not that game this year, yes, absolutely. It's a great tune-up game that if they lose, I'm gonna lose my mind because they should not lose. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if they play football like they did in the playoffs and the end of the season with Matt Milano back at linebacker, it's not a game they lose. It's just simply it's not going to be a game they lose. Like they can't lose a game where they out talent the other team. They can easily out. I think they can scheme Kyler Murray. Like I don't think he's at the level of he's a threat. Like I have a feeling that Hail Murray still lives in and at least McDermott's head. I know it probably still resides in there and rattles around. Dan Dawkins talked about how they had to live with watching that play for a little while. So I can imagine probably some people who are still on the team from that team probably would love just a week one solid like 28-7 win.
Yeah.
You know, as far as first games go, it's about the right temperature. It's the right about the right opponent you'd want. A team that because I was going to make a boxing analogy, it's or MMA analogy, very much like a fighter they bring in, a little lower tier, or, up and coming, whatever. They bring a fighter in to challenge a guy, just so he knocks rust off, type of thing. Or it's the same idea here.
It's good enough.
Hmm.
It's knock the rust off opponent. That's you're not going to have to bring out your fastball to beat. I hope not. I hope not.
So my take on the opening week game, it's fine. I do have some concerns about Milano not playing because I feel like he could be a big piece of that game. Kyler Murray, we talked about how much of a dual threat he is, and I know some people in here aren't as high on him as I am. I still think he's a tremendous quarterback. I think he's a great athlete, and I think we should respect him and treat him as one. Um, having a Matt Milano in that game would help. Terrell Bernard's a great player. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, as far as spying purposes, I would like to have both guys on the field. But again, it's a young team, and week one's wonky. It's going to be a tough one. I could see a scenario where the Cardinals will be like, we're going to run the ball, we're going to control the tempo of this game, and we're going to keep ourselves into this until the very end of the game. And I that's kind of how I envision it happening. I do think the Bills pull it out. I think it's going to be one of those aggravating, hair-pulling wins, but I do think they will win. Just probably not in a convincing fashion. I do think a lot of people are sleeping on the Cardinals. I think they had a very nice offseason. I think they had a really good draft. And yes, there's still some areas in the team that isn't great, but I think they're going to be much improved from last year. And when you look at a team like that last year, I think the conclusion everybody came up with is that they kept fighting in every single game. And they beat the Cowboys, who made the playoffs with Josh Dobbs as their quarterback and a really poor roster. So one thing you could say about them is they're very tough and they're not going to be an easy out. So yeah, it's fine. That kind of moves us into the next discussion here, and it is, what do you think is the toughest matchup? And now I think some people in this podcast here are going to say, oh, it's Kansas City, Mahomes. That's going to be the big one. And I think other people might say the Niners and their dominant run game and what Kyle Shanahan's able to do. And I haven't seen him match up with Sean McDermott with all of his weapons at his disposal. So I'm curious to see what you guys say. I'm going to start with Peter again. Obviously, what do you think? Who do you think's the toughest opponent for the Bills in the 2024 season?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I think you can probably say 4 to 5 different games, right? And I don't think it's the Chiefs. I don't think it's the 49ers. Those both games are at home, right? And then the 49ers is coming off a bye, right? In my
Right.
individual prediction, I know we're going to get to it later. I think the Bills probably potentially lose that game, but you're coming off a bye, right? And I know the 49ers are really good, but I think they're beatable really good, right? Uh, I think the toughest game is week 15 at Detroit. And we talked about it earlier, right? 2 years ago, a Detroit team that was on the come up just wasn't there yet, but you could see the trajectory they were going. They ended the season just missing the playoffs 2 years ago, right? But they were playing really good football. They were not an easy out, right? Like tough game every week. Now Detroit's a legit contender in the NFC, right? Week 15 at Detroit, I think, is a really, really tough game, just based on where the Bills could be in the
Yeah.
standings. Right? Coming off with San Fran, you're coming off with the Rams. Both games I think they can win, but tough games. You go to Detroit, and then obviously the following 3 weeks, you have 3 division games. And I don't know where the division sits. I don't know where the Bills sit when it comes to playoffs, but I think that Detroit game, week 15, could do two different things. I think if you win that game, it probably propels you to 3 straight wins, right? And that probably puts you to win the division, probably 12 to 13 wins, 2 or 3 seed. You lose that game, I think it has a ripple effect. And we know how well the Bills play at the end of their season. But I think at Detroit, week 15 is a really sneaky game. That's going to be tough. One other quickly game I just want to throw in there. Week 3, Monday Night Football against the Jaguars. For some reason, we do not play well against the Jaguars. I think we are a way better team than the Jaguars. Roster-wise, coaching-wise, quarterback-wise, I think we are a better team than the Jaguars. I think they're kind of one of the frauds in the AFC, and we kind of saw that last year with their crumble at the end of the year. That's a game you kind of have to win, but for some reason the Bills have struggled to beat the Jaguars over the years. So I think that's another, not the toughest matchup, but a sneaky tough matchup week 3.
Do you
I'm
think it's make
looking.
it or break
Yeah,
it for Trevor Lawrence this year?
I don't think so because I think they're gonna pay him before the year. So I think there's a couple rumors coming out that they're working really hard to pay him, and so we could see it as like if they pay him and then he struggles, it's kind of a make it or break it year in the sense of like where he has his quarterback. But the problem is if they lock him in 5, 6 years, it really isn't, right? So if they don't pay him, then yes. If they pay him, then you can't really go that avenue, even if he struggles, because they're stuck in that contract. Similar to Tua, if they pay him, right? It's a make it break it for Tua this upcoming season. But if
Oh
they
yeah.
pay him, it's not. Then it becomes
mhm.
not just because we might not think he's an elite quarterback. I don't think he's an elite quarterback, but if they have him for 5 years, he's their problem for 5 years. So it's not a make it or break it if he wants a long-term contract. So it depends if they pay him. I think they're going to pay Trevor Lawrence before the year. So that question might not fully work. But if they don't pay him, 100%. And even if they do pay him, it might become that narrative that maybe he's not an elite quarterback.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because it was something I talked about the other day. It's because a lot of teams have been willing to pay kind of these middle tier quarterbacks. You saw the Lions just dished out a ton of money to Jared Goff. The Giants did the same thing with Daniel Jones, and you're seeing Geno Smith got paid, Baker Mayfield got paid. Like, these aren't elite quarterbacks, right? So, it's interesting to see the teams are taking these approach, and they're kind of content with paying these middle level, second, third tier quarterbacks. And it's really interesting when you look at Trevor Lawrence because a lot of people think, look at the name, it's Trevor Lawrence, he's awesome. Last year it wasn't good for him. It wasn't pretty, and I know there's a bit of dysfunction there. I don't really fully love Doug Peterson as a coach. I don't think he's the greatest scheme artist in the world, but I am interested about that whole concept. It's a very interesting thing to talk about, and I guess I kind of just got sidetracked there. But as far as the toughest matchup goes, I do like that Lions one because you look at that stretch there. It's the Colts who I really like, the Chiefs, the Niners, the Rams. Then you got the Lions. That's a rough stretch, and the Lions kind of cap it off, and then you're going right through it there, right in the heart of the season, right when those games really count. So I would say them in a game I think that could give us some trouble. I don't want it to, but is October 6th against Houston. I think in Houston,
Yeah.
it's going to be a different energy now. I think that they know that this team's for real. CJ Stroud has kind of proven he's put them on the map again. And that's going to be a really tough wide receiver core to defend. You got Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs. I'm not entirely convinced we have the secondary to keep up with that anymore.
Ben Skowronek.
So it's Benny Skoranek. Yes. I'm glad you threw that out there. Keep the Benny Skoranek train going.
Never gonna
Dalton
stop.
Schultz too. Like, yeah, it's gonna be
Oh.
Joe
it's gonna be
Mixon.
tough. Yeah, it's not gonna be easy at all. I could see us really falling on our ass that game. So I would say that in the Lions. So I'll turn over to Trent and what do you think the toughest matchup is this year?
Um, let's see here. I don't know if this is the category, because honestly, I look at it differently. I'm gonna say toughest matchup is the at Jets game, and I'm gonna say at Jets. Because god damn it, I'm sick and fucking tired of the Jets. I am tired of them. I am sick and tired of them. I don't know if it's the damn swamps in New Jersey or what the hell's going on down there that makes all these good quarterbacks play like absolute shit down there. I am tired of the stupid ass Jets. I am sick of them. I'm sick of their stupid bald head quarterback coach. I'm stupid of their stupid crackhead quarterback. I'm sick of their stupid corner. What kind of name Sauce? What is that?
I think Trent broke.
Yeah, we broke Trent.
7 to 10 ass fucking Sauce out of here. Get out of here. I need the Bills. I need Josh Allen to go for mega stats against the Jets on it's a Monday night game too. Oh my god. Yes, that is the toughest matchup because I'm tired of the Jets. I am so tired of them. I hate
They haven't even been good.
I know. That's why they piss me off.
What are you gonna do if they're good?
Oh, I don't know.
Are you gonna stop watching football?
I'll be like Shrek and live in the swamp.
Oh no.
Good lord.
No.
I will become one with the swamp. I'll become a croquet fan of the Jets get good because it'll be a cold day in hell.
Yeah.
Yes, the Jets, because God knows, God, I need the Bills to win on Monday Night Football against the Jets because I can't have another Josh Allen 4 interceptions falling apart on national TV game like he does
Right.
every time he goes to the stupid MetLife Stadium.
God,
I'm
week one
fumbling
had
my
you in shambles last year, didn't
Yeah, that was you're still going. Yeah.
I yeah.
All
That was
right.
passionate. That was really.
Yeah,
I
I
I
Oh.
appreciate it.
I
I
hate the
do.
Jets. So I think I hate the Jets equal amounts that I love the Bills. Like the
Oh,
That's
Jets are
crazy.
the Jets
That's
are like
crazy.
second on my the number one on my hatred list because like the Patriots they're gone. They blew them out 47-17. I watched it with my own eyes. It was great, wonderful. Exonerated the ghosts of Christmas past. The fish, they're just kind of funny because all they got big loud fan base. They go, oh, we got Tyreek Hill. Oh, we're so fast. Yeah, have fun in December when it's cold and everyone's hurt.
Jesus.
Jets. Oh my God, I hate the Jets. Oh, I hate the Jets. I hate the Jets. I hate the Jets. I hate the Jets.
All right,
They
Trent, I think we
just
get it.
wipe them
I
up
think we
there.
get it.
So Jets.
All
Mike, what do you
right.
have to say about this?
There's Trent's rant. We got that out of
I
the
had
way. It
I
was
had to get my Jets
passionate. It
rant.
was heated. I'm gonna let you just sit over in the corner and calm down for a couple minutes. Take a couple breathers. Take a melatonin. Just calm down. All right.
Punch the
We'll
first
be
in that's Jets
okay. We'll
green.
be
All
okay.
right, all right. Wow with a capital W. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
So, in the
I,
midst of this passionate excursion, Trent just went down. I would say, and ironically enough, the toughest matchup for the Bills will be September 29th, Bills at Ravens. I think that could have huge implications for seeding. And I don't know. I just feel like this is finally going to be the year where the Ravens can finally do something against this Bills defense that just seems to always be able to figure out Lamar Jackson. I just think it's gonna. I think from week 2 to week 6, that is going to be, in my opinion, the most pivotal month of the season. You know, facing Miami, Jacksonville, the Ravens, the Texans, and then the Jets. All those primetime games in the midst too, all that pressure. I think that's where this team is really going to find who they are and what they can possibly do to finish off the season,
yeah.
you know, in those last 10 weeks.
I would say, yeah. I mean, you look at that stretch and then the stretch I mentioned and me and Peter talked about. Those are like two like crazy set of games. And then in between that you got the filler games or whatever, but
Mhm.
those are tough, man. Like they're gonna need to bring it every week. And this team, how they're very streaky, the Bills. You know, when you see them when they lose a game, they tend to just not play well for a few weeks and they figure it out. Like this past year, they fired Ken Dorsey to kind of snap themselves out of it. I'm hoping they don't find themselves in the same situation because it was very dire. We were like what
Yeah.
5-5 at the halfway
Mhm.
point of the
We
season.
almost hit the red button. Yeah,
It was
Oh,
not good. It was looking ugly.
yeah.
And I just don't want this team to be in that same position again. And I know it's a tough schedule and you're gonna have there's gonna be a chance where you're gonna go down that road again, and it's either sink or swim, and it's gonna be a test for Sean McDermott, I think, this year more than ever, because your roster's not as good as it has been before. You have a very young team. You're getting way younger, and you're facing some really, really good football teams. So, are you going to be able to coach them to being a playoff contender, Super Bowl contender
Yeah.
still? That's on you. It's a big test for him, and I'm very intrigued because I think, Sean McDermott. It's going to really tell us what kind of coach he is, and I think he gets a lot of hate, and I also think he gets a lot of more love than he deserves. I think, there's a little bit of both. So I'm very interested to see how that's going to play out, and I want to kind of get both of your thoughts on it, all your guys' thoughts on it, because I hadn't even really thought about that until now. And I'll start with Peter. Like, do you really think like this year, based on what I said, the young team, the matchups they got, like there's a lot of pressure on Sean McDermott.
Yeah, no, there is, right? And Obviously, expectations don't seem to be as high, but I still think the Bills are a top 2, top 3 team in the AFC, right? So as long as you have Josh Allen, who in my opinion is the second best quarterback in the NFL, right? Your expectations are high, and yeah, it is a big year for Sean McDermott. It's a big year for Joe Brady. It's a big year for Brandon Beane, especially with how they shaped this receiving core, right? It's just a little bit different than what we have seen the last couple years, especially without Stephon Diggs and without Gabe Davis. There's a lot of pressure on a lot of guys, and I think the Bills are legit Super Bowl contenders, but I also think what they did this summer or this offseason, not summer, this offseason leads you into a year where in 2025 you could be a little bit more of a big spender and kind of retool everything. They retooled the roster. They didn't rebuild the roster because once you rebuild, you kind of rip it down. They retooled the roster and they got younger. So they're still top 5 team in the National Football League, still super high expectations, still Super Bowl expectations for this team. But it's a younger team, and it's probably what they needed. That last kind of core just didn't work out.
They
And
definitely needed that.
they needed it. So there's gonna be a little bit of learning curves with some of the young guys. I think this roster is from top to bottom super talented. I think they have a lot of good position groups. Like Matt Milano coming back is good. I think the O line is still really good, right? I think this team is still really good. But Sean McDermott's going to have a little bit more of a challenge coaching this year, right? The secondary is a little different this year, but Sean McDermott's strength is in the secondary. We've seen him develop a Dane Jackson, a Levi Wallace, guys that were 7th-round picks, undrafted kind of guys, into legit NFL players that got contracts. Obviously, Christian Benford is another one of those guys that's eventually going to get his contract, and he's really good. Terrell Bernard, right? There's a lot of guys that I think Sean McDermott's good at, and the biggest weakness is probably the secondary. A little bit, a couple of new guys coming in, and Mike Edwards drafting Cole Bishop, a little bit younger. But I think if that's the weakest spot, that's a good thing because that's Sean McDermott's strength. So yes, a lot of pressure on him, huge expectations for him. But I think where we lie a little bit of a weakness is where he excels at. And I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it over to Mike because I want to see what you really think about the pressure as far as that goes. Like, what's your take on that whole thing?
So to me, it's going to come down to how does Sean McDermott do in the final 2 minutes? Can he finally seemingly get that together and get us over that hump for us to take the next step? I've been reading up on a lot of articles about the Bills, obviously with all the changes made this offseason, and what's really stuck out to me is everyone's so concerned about what the wide receiver room and about the offense, but the majority of the changes on this team came on defense, and I'm really eager to see what that new defense looks like. You know what I mean? I mean, there's just so many new pieces. I wonder if it can maintain that same level of play that they had in the beginning of the season last year before all of the injuries, and if they can also take that next step so that if our wide receiver room isn't as strong, it's not all just on Josh Allen to be, Superman.
Yeah. Trent, I hope you've calmed down by now. So I'm gonna give it to you.
I
What do you think?
I've told any jets flying over my house to fly away from it for a while. But
Okay.
listen, at the end of the day, the Bills have the big guy. That's really all that matters.
Right.
When we're talking about where the Bills rank in the AFC, I mean it's a quarterback driven league, and the Bills have arguably when he's on it, when he is feeling himself the best quarterback in football. I mean, he doesn't feel it often. That his lows are really low, his highs really high. So when you average it all out, you get about the second best quarterback. But they go as far as Josh takes him, and that's just how football is. It's always been. There was a short period of time where you could just put Mike Allstott in your backfield and just power through teams, and Eddie George, Sean Alexander, you just out running back teams, and that's not the case anymore. I mean, well, actually, NFC kind of shows that if you're in a conference full of like your best quarterback is Dak Prescott, maybe Jalen Hurts. Peter, who do you think is the best quarterback in the NFC? Just a side tangent. Who do you think is the best quarterback in the NFC? Because I truly do not know.
Well, it could be It could be Brock Purdy, right? Just because of the system he's in, right? So
Yeah, that's a good point.
he might not be the most talented quarterback,
All
but
right, yeah.
wise, Jared Goff, I think, is really underrated. I think Matthew Stafford's probably a year or two past his kind of his peak, but he could be in there. Probably Jalen Hurts. I don't love it, but I think he has a bounce back here, and probably Jordan Love is probably a guy that
I forgot. I
could take
forgot
that.
Jordan Love got good.
Look, what
Jordan Love
I
is
just listed
sensational.
5 to 6 guys, and we all had this probably the same reaction of like, yeah, maybe, maybe not. Like that's where the NFC is at. There's
I
five to
mean,
six
look,
guys that
look,
are
look,
good quarterbacks. Maybe we don't have a great quarterback. I think Jordan Love could become a great quarterback. I think
yeah.
Jalen Hurts could be a bounce back year, and I bet you Brock Purdy probably never gets maybe the praise he ever deserves. I'm not saying he deserves it, but if he deserves it, he probably just never gets it just based off that roster and the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely showed that he's not, he's more Tom Brady than Nathan Peterman, but
Yeah,
that scale's pretty damn wide. I mean,
yeah.
It doesn't take much.
Yeah.
So with
Yeah.
all this like roster talk, Peter, I actually have a question for you as well is what do you think this running game looks like on this team?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think like James Cook finished fourth in the National Football League in rushing yards, and I don't really know if that is talked about enough, right? Just because when you think of the Bills' offense, obviously you thought of Stephon Diggs, when you think of Josh Allen, right? Like you don't right away think of James Cook, but second year in the National Football League has fourth in the league in rushing yards, right? And it took a while to get going just based off how the offense worked. I think this running game is interesting. I think it's going to be really good. I think Ty Johnson's a sneaky third option. I think when he was used, he was productive. Obviously, he just wasn't used a lot, and that's kind of his role. But when he was used, he was productive. I think James Cook's probably at that point of being a top 10 running back and an elite running back in this league. His touchdown numbers aren't great. That's probably more on how the Bills use him and what the Bills do in the red zone, especially with Josh Allen's running ability. I think the Ray Davis selection, I'm a huge draft guy, so I think the Ray Davis selection in the fourth round gives you exactly what the Bills needed in the run game. I think they needed another kind of thumper, and they didn't really have that with James Cook and Ty Johnson. So now you have Ray Davis going to come in those short yardage packages when they don't want to use Allen. 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, that's Ray Davis. Goal line, that's Ray Davis. So obviously, if you think of James Cook for fantasy, you might get a little annoyed just based off his touchdown numbers might not be there. But I think Ray Davis's touchdown numbers might be pretty good. So I think they have a good 1-2 punch. James Cook, that elite running back. Ray Davis, that change of pace running back that kind of will run anybody over. It has really kind of underrated quick speed. And then I think Ty Johnson's kind of that scat back, that kind of wild card. I think it's going to be a fun run game. And I think Joe Brady loves to run the ball. And if you can be an elite running team, which I think they were towards the end of the year, and when they went on their hot streak, they were just running the ball, running the ball, running the ball. We saw that in the Dallas game. We really didn't see that under Ken Dorsey as much as I think we should have. The Bills were really hard to stop because if you can run the ball down teams' throats, you still have Josh Allen right there, and it
True.
just makes you so dynamic. So I think this running game is going to be good. It's going to be fun, and I think the room is good, and I think how they use the room, especially with Joe Brady and how he wants to run the ball, is going to be good.
I'm
I'm
glad
glad
Definitely
you.
something to be
I'm
excited
glad you
about.
mentioned that, Peter, because that's actually something. Well, we talked about the Ray Davis pick last week on the show, and also the remodeling of the team. But one thing I did like how you mentioned was the running, and it's one of the things I don't think we ever really got to cover. But like moving McGovern to center and probably either having David Edwards, dude they signed from the Bengals this year. Ben, help me out here.
Lyle Collins.
Lyle Collins, and or Cedric Van Pran, right? Cedric Van Pran. Let's
Yeah.
go there. What you've done is you've turned your line back into being a big physical line, which I saw a clip earlier of a Bills spread pull run game with LaShawn McCoy where it was guard pull, center spread, tackle out wide. And it's the most beautifully blocked play I've ever seen because the linemen are big, physical, strong linemen in a power scheme, which is I think what Joe Brady wants to run
Yeah.
with our line and how it is. I think that really plays a factor in what they were doing. And I think the Ray Davis pick is a good pick for that. And he also, I think he's a little more closer to Ty Johnson's skill set. And he does bring some thunder. He has some speed to him too, which I mean he's going to be a nice compliment in the backfield. Like I didn't like it was the fourth round pick, but like the actual player itself, like I hope I said something about that. Like the actual player himself, Ray Davis, is going to be a good addition. I didn't like it was a fourth round pick, but like yeah, would my feelings been solider if it's one of the 5 5th round picks? Yeah, probably. But I'm glad you brought up the running game because I think the way they've redone that offense lends into being more balanced, like truly a balanced football team. And balance comes when you can run the ball.
Agreed.
And the Bills have tried for years to run the ball, and the spread offensive lines don't run the ball. They've never been the the only teams that can do that are teams that have a receiving core so deadly that you have to panic about them being out there, or you have a running back that'll just punch a guy in the face as soon as he gets the ball, like a Marshawn Lynch, Mike Allstott type. That you're going to be for a tough ride when you tackle him. Like that's the
Yeah.
only reason spread lines work. Otherwise, you have to
Yeah.
have power lines, which is something they finally have. So that'll be exciting. And Ben, I believe our next question on this, the easiest matchup of the season.
Yeah. So
Uh,
yeah, just to put a bow on all that, I am glad you guys did talk about the offense because this isn't going to be Ken Dorsey's offense anymore. It's Joe Brady's offense
thank
now.
God.
It's going to
Holy
have new
crap.
wrinkles. It's going to have different looks, and I'm very curious to see how he kind of glues it all together. We've seen some of the moves they've made in the offseason. They kind of like targeting those yards after the catch receivers. They're really like not too interested in going out and getting a bona fide number one wide receiver. They've put a lot of work into establishing a ground game, and I think that's kind of what the Bills want to be. They want to be that bully ball. We're going to win in the trenches, and then we're going to use our superstar quarterback, and that's how we're going to play. And I love it, and I feel like that just screams Buffalo to me. And I think when you think of the best days of Brian Dable, we were running the ball in the playoffs just at will, at whatever we wanted to do against the Patriots in that game, and that's the Bills at their best when they can run the ball. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And so yeah, the easiest matchup. I'm just gonna go here. It's been a minute since I've talked, so I'm gonna go here. Yeah, I think
Guess
this
the
is a bit
host
of a
has to say something.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's a bit of a tough question because I think the schedule is really tough, but I am going to go with the Patriots. I know Peter covered them, and we'll kind of get into that in a minute. And to me, I like what they did in the draft. I like some of the moves they made. I'm not too convinced on their coaching staff though. They brought in Gerard Mayo, who again doesn't have experience as a first-time head coach. Belichick disciple. That I feel very strongly about Belichick disciples. It's not a very high hit rate. Alex Van Pelt is their offensive coordinator. Comes from the Cleveland system. Again,
Former Buffalo Bills backup
right?
quarterback.
Yes, he was, and he, obviously didn't stick around in Cleveland for a reason. So, um, I don't know. I'm not too convinced about the coaching staff. That's my biggest concern with them. But I love their draft. I love what they did. Drake May was my QB two, and so. But I just think with a young quarterback and a new coaching staff, that is a team the Bills should be able to pick apart. And I know they got some talent on defense, and sometimes the Bills have struggled against it. But we've also seen the Bills dominate the Patriots, and I think that's a kind of what we're going to see this year. And I think give it, a year or two, and Drake May will kind of get that team to where it needs to be because I truly believe that Drake May and the future of that team is it's really good. But again, I'm not too sold on the coaching staff, and I don't like them that much. So I'm going to say that would probably be the easiest matchup. Just in terms of we're gonna get a lot of information on them. We're playing twice a year. It's at the end of the year against a young football team. They're gonna be a bit beaten up. We're going to be at two different stages at our season. We're going to be fighting for playoff spots. They're probably fighting for draft picks. So I'll let Peter go. Obviously, I said the Patriots. So I don't know if you share the same thoughts, but what do you think? What do you think the easiest matchup is?
Yeah, I'm not going to go with the Patriots just because you said it, but your points you were spot on. I like Drake May a lot. I think he's probably a developmental guy. He was my QB2 as well, but he's probably a year or two away from being maybe a legit threat. Didn't love the Gerard Mayo kind of hire. I thought if you're going to move off Belichick, just go completely different. kind of just no connection to Bill Belichick at all is what they should have done, and they didn't. And I think this defense is going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough. Their roster on offense is not scary. Jalen Polk's a nice addition. Javon Baker's a nice addition. I just think they're young developmental guys in the sense they don't have an elite guy. And I think, like you said, week 16 and week 18, the Patriots could be out of it, and it just could be mailing it in at that point. But I would say, just not to say that matchup, just to keep it interesting, week 7, the Bills hosting Tennessee, right? I don't know what Tennessee's going to be this year. I don't think Tennessee's going to be good. I think Will Levis is still a very huge question mark. Their quarterback room is a question mark. They don't have Derrick Henry anymore. I just think, and I forgot who they hired as their head coach. It always skips my mind.
Somebody
But
from the Bengals.
yeah, Callahan.
Brian Callahan. Yep.
Thank you, Brian Callahan. Like I think their new head coach, they don't really have a quarterback, or they're still very up in the air. It's a quarterback room of Will Levis, Mason Rudolph, and Malik Willis, right? Like it's not great. Tony Pollard's a solid, nice addition. It's cool. He's a good player. I think Calvin Ridley gives you that kind of option with obviously Tyler Boyd as well. I just don't buy the Titans at all. So I think that's probably, outside of the Patriots, probably the easiest matchup. And I think the Titans are probably in Buffalo. I just don't think they have the kind of the guys to go at Buffalo in Buffalo.
Yeah. And kind of piggyback off
It's
what you said, sorry if I'm trying.
Nah,
I think
it's okay.
I think that team
just
lives
kill you.
or dies with Will Levis. I mean, if he's not good,
It doesn't
they're
matter
not good.
Plus,
who the receivers are at that
Yeah,
point.
it's really he is going to decide the fate of that team. And to me, they're obviously doing what they should be doing around a young quarterback. They're building around him. They're putting their belief in him. But if he flops, that team's going to flop. So I'm not entirely convinced on Will Levis, but I do think there's a small chance that it works out. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I didn't mean to cut you off, Trent, but I'll let you go. You can go ahead and
I was
give us
actually going to
your
piggyback on that. That
yeah. Go ahead.
Titans have the coolest 2019 football roster ever. Like
I think everyone's underrating the
if
Titans.
you're like, hey, assemble me like the most underrated guys in 2019, and you get one headlining guy, that's exactly the team I would build. like bar for bar, I would build that team. Like that would be my lineup. I'm actually going to go a little bit different direction here. I'm going to go with week 2 at Miami, and here's why.
Whoa.
I think this is the easiest matchup because you take away a lot of what Miami has, which is home field advantage. You took that away. So now you're on neutral grounds. And for me, if we're looking at, like, if you look at it like a scale, like what's the maximum worst outcome versus the maximum best outcome? Playing Miami week 2 on Thursday night is probably one of the best outcomes you could have come out with the schedule. And that's simply that you get to play the Dolphins at night. Like, I can't emphasize how huge that is for the Buffalo Bills, is that they get to play Miami. You could say, we play them in December when they're falling apart. Yes, I agree. Like, that would have been better, but I would say this is the easiest in terms of like the worst that could come, because let's be real here, there are no easy games in the NFL. The Bills lose plenty of stupid games all the time that, like, they'll win games that have you on your, that you'll be looking at each other like, did we just, like the Cowboys game, like, did we just kick the snot out of the Cowboys? And they'll have games where you're like, did we just lose to the Broncos at home after
Right.
putting 12
I
guys on the
went to
field
that
for a
game.
field goal? You
Yep.
probably did. But like there are no easy games. So I would put getting Miami week 2 at a night game is pretty dang good. Like that is.
So what you're saying is Josh Allen's going to win AFC Player of the Week again.
Yes.
Yep. Fair enough. I respect
No,
it.
I get it. I get what you're trying to say. The Bills have historically owned them, and they've beaten up on them, and that's a fair answer, especially with a lot of those factors in play.
Truly, Charles Clay
yeah.
set off a demon inside of Josh Allen that
He
every
did.
time, like as much as the goofball Chris Pratt, Josh Allen comes out when we play the Jets, where he just lops up like 5 interceptions and 25 fumbles and gets infected with swamp gas. Like the demon inside Josh Allen comes out where he just
And he
reaps
just goes
souls.
crazy.
Yeah,
He just
Yeah.
goes
he's
nuts.
out there reaping souls against Miami. It's
And he turns
Yeah.
into that boy.
madness.
Mike, I know you aren't going to say the Titans, so I'm curious to see who do you think is the easiest matchup because it's not the Titans. I would assume the Patriots, but then again, you're a wild card, so go ahead and take the floor.
So I'm gonna go different from everybody else, also to keep this interesting. But I do agree with your Patriots point. Is that should be barbecue chicken, but
Chicken.
Bills versus Seahawks. Um,
Hmm.
I
Interesting.
you know I like
Hmm.
the Seahawks defense, but I just don't think Seattle has the passing game to be able to keep up with a Bills team that's hopefully rolling in the middle of the season, coming off of some marquee wins after that week 2 through 6 stretch, and hopefully in relatively easier game versus Tennessee. I would
Right.
like for that to be a big statement game for this team to be like, hey, like we're for real, we're legit, we're gonna go into Kansas City next week ready to
Mhm.
go.
Right.
We're gonna take
Yeah.
this final stretch of the season and really show you who we are.
Yeah, I respect that answer totally because I kind of hadn't thought about that. I really like the McDonald hire. I like the moves they made this offseason. I really like it because Pete Carroll was kind of, he's getting old. It was a lot of the same stuff with them, and it was an archaic kind of team. It was like, you're living in the 2000s. You gotta make a change. So,
Yeah, it didn't have the
yeah,
juice.
it didn't. And I like Geno Smith's story, but do I believe in him as the long-term starter for the Seahawks? Absolutely not. He's not. And there's a reason they traded for a developmental guy, or if you want to call him a developmental guy, but a guy with upside. And Sam Howell, I think he's a sneaky guy that could potentially take over if Geno
I
doesn't play
agree.
well.
100% agree.
And so it's interesting to see like they don't to me that feels like they're not 100% all in on Geno. So that tells me they're not fully confident in their offense. So yeah, I like that answer, and I'm glad you brought it up because I don't think that offense is going to be very good this year. I think the defense could be phenomenal. They
Agreed.
drafted Byron Murphy. They did some nice things over
I
there.
love Devin Witherspoon.
Yes, they did some fun things, and Mike McDonald is very, very fun in terms of what he does on the defensive side of the ball. So I do like that answer a lot. So yeah, that kind of covers it for that. Well, that leads us into our final topic. We're going to talk about just kind of something we're all going to go through ourselves. You guys don't have to really break it down like super crazy. But I'm just gonna ask around, tally what you guys say here and kind of ask what your record prediction is going to be. I'm going to start because I've been thinking about this for a while, and I try to be optimistic as possible because I am a Bills fan, and unfortunately, bias does get involved in the equation here. But I tried to refrain from as much bias as possible, and I came to the conclusion that I felt that 11-6 would probably be the record they end up with. I think 6 losses seems about right. 11 wins seems about right. I feel like it will end up being either the Jets or the Dolphins that finish with 11-6 as well. And we tie or whatever, but we have the tiebreaker and we end up getting in as like the third or the fourth seed in the AFC. That's what I project for the Bills this year. I don't think they have the same ceiling as they have had in the years past, but I do project a good but not great season. But, it's great for some teams, but for the Bills, it's good. So I'm gonna go to Mike. I'm gonna get your take on it, and then we'll go to Peter, and then we'll go to Trent. I want to see what you guys think. I don't know if you guys share the same thing, but I feel like 11 wins seems right in the middle there. So Mike, what do you got for us?
11-6 is what I was going to go with as well. But the more
Hmm.
I was looking at this schedule, definitely a super safe pick. Like
Yes,
I think that's this team's, baseline, like their average, most likely outcome. But I definitely, on the high end, could see this team going 13-4.
really.
Yeah, I think the two matchups between KC and the Niners, honestly, I don't think we take either of those games personally, but I really like us against the vast majority of the rest of our schedule. I think I'll go with 13-4.
Right. Okay. Peter, I don't know if you're as high on the Bills this year with 13 wins, but how many wins do you think they're going to get?
Yeah. So I put a tweet out when the schedule came out on that Wednesday night. I think it was Wednesday.
Yeah.
I put a tweet out, right. I did my way too early Buffalo Bills record predictions, right? And I'll put another one out in August, kind of like you never know. There's
Hmm.
injuries to rosters.
Right.
There's always a couple, one or two kind of big injuries, right? Like Joe Burrow injured last year. Like there's injuries that could shape a matchup. It could flip it one way or other, right? I had the Bills. I have actually in between what you guys have, 11 and 13 wins. I have them at 12 and 5, and I had them losing to Baltimore, split with the Jets. So one time at the Jets. So that's gonna go great over in this podcast, and then the Chiefs, San Fran, and then at Detroit. Look, I think this team is good enough to win 12 games. I think their floor is 10 wins. I think that's their floor. And I think their ceiling is probably 13 or 14 wins. 14 is probably just pushing it, but I think 13 or 14 wins just because it's the National Football League and it's really,
Very
really
hard.
hard to go 15-2. It's not that easy, right? Like the defending Super the Chiefs didn't even have a great regular season, right? Like it's just kind of you gotta win, you want to win that division. I think 12 wins obviously does it by a couple of games. So I think 12 wins is kind of where they're at. Look, in my opinion, right? If you have the better quarterback, you are going to win a lot of football games, right? I'm not the biggest fan of Colin Cowherd, but he does like his playoff bracket. He does one regular and then it does another one where he just picks who has the better quarterback, right? That's if
Hmm.
you do that, look, if you do that, the Bills will probably win 16 games. That's not going to happen. But if you do that, like you're kind of at that 12, 13 winning mark just because of how good Josh Allen is. You have elite quarterbacks. Elite quarterbacks win divisions. Elite quarterbacks win football games. I think the Bills have a better roster than people think. I think they're at
Right.
12 and 5. I think they can get to their floor is 10. I think they can get to 13, 14 something. Like this team is special if they get to 14 wins.
Yeah, that would be crazy, and I would be very, very happy with the
Yeah,
with
I'm not going to
14.
complain about 14 and
Yeah,
14.
I wouldn't
I'm
either.
not going to sit
And
here and complain about it. So,
right, yeah, that'd be awesome. I think we're all kind of on the same page here, right? In that range of 10 to 13 seems about right.
yeah.
So Trent, I don't know if you're in that same range. You probably are. Where would you stand at as far as wins go?
13 and 4.
13-4?
And I think Mike and I had argued about this a while back, but the Bills are very like we talk about streaks and whatever. Bills are a trendy team. Like since they got
Hmm.
Josh Allen, every even year they finish with 13 wins, and every odd year they finish with 6 losses.
Interesting.
Huh.
So,
Huh, I didn't
Carrying
even
on the
realize that.
superstition, huh?
Ben, you can recall when they lost the Eagles game. I said they're winning every game from here on out. They,
No,
they're
you
going,
did.
they're going undefeated because they're going to finish 11-6. Like
Right.
they are a creature of habit, and
Right.
I can see this team being a lot like the 2022 team that they get the 13 wins, and it's just the most frustrating way to get the 13 wins.
Hmm.
That they win the games, but it's just like
Be okay with it.
you're like,
Yeah.
okay, we won, but it's like, could we have made that easier? Like, I don't know, football shouldn't be this hard, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it'll be like that, but for an opposite reason that,
I
you know,
shouldn't
Yeah.
be so stressed out before this game's about to
right.
start.
Like, I got Josh Allen. Why am I worried about losing to Geno Smith and the Seahawks? But, like, or like, is Will Levis really going to lead them to a game-winning drive here?
Yeah, but I think
Yeah,
that just kind of goes back to Peter's point about the NFL just being as hard as it is. And I think
yeah.
personally, I've said this multiple times. I think this is the most competitive the AFC's ever been in its history. You look at the talent, you look at the quarterbacks we got, and that's not even mentioning some of the guys that haven't broken out yet, like Anthony Richardson or maybe even a Will Levis breaks out. Like the list goes on and on. And I know you mentioned quarterbacks and there's good quarterbacks. The conference, almost every team has a good quarterback, and that's just
Yeah.
crazy to think about. And it's fun. It's as a Bills fan that's waited many, many years for them to be good, it sucks, but it is fun and it
Oh,
creates for good TV. But
awful.
yeah, but
Hate it.
it's like I do too, trust me. But I feel like, as a baseline, 10, it seems about right. So Yeah, that's pretty much gonna about do it for us here. It was a really fun episode. I really enjoyed having you all on. Obviously, our episodes run a lot longer than what we hope usually. So,
We never
um,
hit our targeted time. I think we need to. I
no,
think we need to aim higher
yeah. But before
or
we
aim
go,
lower. We
I
gotta do
wanna give a
something different.
chance to give Peter a chance to plug all of his stuff here. Where can we find you? Where can we listen to you? And kind of just list off all your podcasts and everything, and where we can find you.
Yeah, first off, appreciate all you guys having me on. It's always fun to talk Bills. And look, you're having fun talking Bills. Podcasts are going to go long. It's the name of the game. It's all fun and games, right? Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at DiBiasi Peter, or just type in Peter DiBiasi. It'll come up. I host a podcast called the Talking Sports Podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And if you're listening, I'm a Bills content creator. I used to work for the Built in Buffalo Network, which is a pretty big brand in the Bills content creating community. I left them a couple weeks ago. Just got a full-time job in sports post graduation. So moving on from them, but that's where you could used to find my content. Just type in DiBiasi Peter, and I host the Talking Sports podcast. But no, appreciate you guys having me on. It was a blast.
Thank you for
Yeah, it
being on.
was. It was a lot of fun. And again, thanks for everybody for coming on, and thanks to anybody that's listening out there. We're now on Spotify. If you haven't checked us out, we're also on Apple Podcasts and YouTube as well. So we will have all those linked in the description. You can all listen to us on those platforms if you prefer those. And thank you guys for all coming on. And I'll just wrap it up with a good Go Bills.
Go
Go
Bills.
Bills.